is testament to the fact that A, there are some great people on the panel, but B, it is a fascinating topic. Broadly speaking, we're looking at the money. We're looking at the money that good FM can make you and the money that bad FM or a lack of FM can cost you. More precisely, the title is this: Risk Management, Protecting Real Estate Portfolio Investments with Quality Facilities Management. A superb panel that we have today. Let me welcome them now to the stage. First of all, I mentioned him earlier, Abdullah. Please join us. Abdullah Al-Wahidi, the Senior Director of Facilities Management at MR Properties. Jobs in FM don't come much bigger than the world's tallest tower. Anthony Taylor is joining us. Come and join us, please, Anthony, Fund Manager with Emirates NBD Asset Management, about 1.5 billion dirhams worth of assets under management there at Emirates NBD. Also, with a legal perspective on this, joining us on stage, Mike Wakefield. Mike's a partner with Galladari Advocates and legal consultants based in DIFC. Hi there, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. And finally, Neil Blakey, Facilities Site Lead with Johnson & Johnson here in this region. Neil, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Right, we are missing... Oh, no, here we go. We have a full house. Excellent. Nice to see you. Abdullah, first of all, if I can turn to you, I was really interested in the notes that you sent through, that you focused on something that very few people had focused on, and it was safety. And very important, you say this: the whole purpose of risk management plan and facilities management is to lower the likelihood of accidents or failure events and to minimize the consequences of accidents or failure events, which is interesting.
Yes, basically, as mentioned earlier, it's very important to protect the people within the building, because the risk has many definitions. It's risk related to the building, risk related to the people, risk related to the operations. So all these factors work together, and then if something happens, the impact is huge on the organization itself. So safety comes in in the beginning of the list, and it's very critical to any operations.
So, and I guess if you're looking at something high profile like Dubai Mall or Burj Khalifa,
of course,
you've also got reputational risk,
of course,
which has many factors, but one of them is financial.
Yeah, one of them is financial, but especially when you talk about Dubai Mall or you talk about Burj Khalifa, you're talking about the reputation of the city. So anything that could go wrong, it affects the entire city. It's not, the damage itself is not just to the asset. The damage is beyond the asset. It goes actually to the emirate and the country. So the impact is huge when it comes to risk.
Mike Wakefield, if I can turn to you from the legal perspective, you've spent a lot of time working in hotels in particular, which I think is interesting. And you say that effective and experienced facility management can lead to significant economic benefits for your property and clients. And that comes from experience in professional services, but also working for big hotel companies. I think it was IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group, you worked at for a long time. So what did you learn?
I think from the outset, the company has to set itself up for success in terms of the hotel management agreement. I was very interested to hear Mohammed's comments in the presentation about performance-based contracts, because in my experience, the most successful contracts are the ones where both parties either share the pain or share the benefit of a well-crafted, risk-managed contract. I think that's basically the principal takeaway I had from my time in hotels and leisure. To a certain extent, it's also true of the oil and gas industry, where many years ago there was this pain share, gain share idea in the North Sea. So long as you can get a successful balance in the contract, you have a contract which is risk managed and easier actually to fulfill the obligations of. Ideally, you want a contract that's so fair that as soon as it's signed, you put it in a drawer and forget about it. In terms of facilities management, it's kind of common sense. The better you set yourself up to look after something, either yourself or through a third party, the more cost effective it's going to be in the long run.
In terms of particularly working with hotels, you say investing in experienced facility managers is a must, but also energy efficiency consultants. What success did you have in encouraging either the hotel owners or the management company like IHD or a Sheraton or Jumeirah? What success did you have in convincing them to make that investment? How difficult was it?
It's never easy to get an owner to spend more money than he's already doing.
And is it the owners who spend this money?
Absolutely. Very rarely in today's market will you see hotel management companies taking an equity share in an asset. It's just not cost effective for them. However, it's also a very difficult conversation with an owner who's spending $500 million in a five-star property to get him to spend an extra X% on the type of technologies that we've been hearing from the panel today. With that said, IHG has become somewhat of a pioneer, and they have committed to building a 170-bed, completely 100% carbon neutral property out near Dubai Silicon Oasis. So there is a commitment there on the back of corporate social responsibility obligations, and there is a clear need for it in the market. It'll be interesting to see how that particular development transpires and whether it's effective or not long term.
Neil Blakey, from the perspective of Johnson & Johnson, huge multinational company, you say effective FM planning, design and delivery, those three things, plan, design and then of course delivery. It allows better management of long-term costs, better management of risks, operational risks, safety and financial risks. It also creates improved utilization of space and assets. I mean, that's a fairly compelling proposition, isn't it? What led you to that conclusion with your long career in FM, not just with Johnson & Johnson? What led you to that really, really bullish facilities management is great conclusion?
Well, I think if I could just take you back to your opening statement where you said FM has an image problem. One of the things we used to talk about was everybody knows what a doctor does. They look after the human body. You have general practitioners, you have specialists. I say that the facilities manager is the doctor of the built environment. So we maintain it, we look after it. When it's sick, we fix it. You know, so we have a role to play across the whole piece. So when we've worked with clients and we've been lucky to engage early, certainly on a new build project, we can look at, you know, the factors that will influence energy performance, the way occupants will interact in that space, but also some of the unseen things from an FM point of view in terms of how we will manage that operation. And getting in early and not so much dictating, but certainly influencing and supporting the client in some of the decisions can have such a long-reaching effect. And as Christopher said earlier on, 20%, well 30%, but possibly even 20% of the initial cost versus 80% of your running cost. You know, time well spent, certainly with technical design reviews, looking at how will something that looks nice actually be maintained, fixed, repaired, replaced. If a certain feature is going to take your organization out for a point of time that you can't deliver, it has a fundamental impact in your day-to-day operation. So I see it as that important to the built environment, to building operation.
And Johnson & Johnson takes this stuff seriously. I guess you wouldn't have joined them unless they did. What are the things that they do? Or perhaps some of the other clients, because you used to work as an FM consultant, what are the best practices they do that we can take away?
Well, I think to take your point from before, safety is our number one consideration. And, you know, again, what is facilities management? I think if you change facility for risk management, that's what we do. And there is a whole range. But we certainly look at safety first, but then functionality. So it's about the user experience. I'm based on the office side rather than manufacturing. So it's looking at how does somebody experience that facility, from the logistics, the security, the getting into the building, their workplace. It touches every part of their life during their time on the site. So, you know, we're trying to take a holistic approach, and how does it affect productivity of the staff in the building?
So, Anthony Taylor, if I can turn to you, you're the money man on the panel. You're a fund manager with Emirates MBD Asset Management. And while, of course, not everything in life boils down to dollars and cents, it can be quite an important driver. It can be quite an important motivator. And you say that proactive facilities management, which is an interesting phrase, proactive, is key to successful asset management. You can't do your job and deliver the returns that your shareholders want without these guys doing their job properly. It's that important to you.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Richard. It's good to be here. I mean, I think it's late in the day.
If you could pull the microphone a bit closer.
It's a little bit late in the day, and what I've got to say is probably not groundbreaking to everyone here in this industry, but it's very important to have this discussion because as a fund manager, we look from the top down. We look at the numbers, and what we see is a lot of assets in Dubai just not spending the money correctly on real estate. A lot of these owners. So with the fund, we look at two elements. We look at what the operating expenses are, and we look at preventative, proactive maintenance. And it needs to have a different approach for both. One, you are looking for efficiencies and cutting costs. And the other one, you shouldn't be cutting costs. You should be looking at ways to spend money to improve the buildings. As a landlord, we like full buildings. Tenants like to be in buildings that are well maintained. So facilities management is just is key and vital to getting that management right.
But you need it to be cost efficient, don't you? You can't just throw money at this because it is a cost ultimately, isn't it? So how do you balance that? Yes, you want the buildings to be well maintained, but you can't have a facilities management bill going up and up and up and up like this. How do you keep a lid on that?
That's a very good point. If we take a step back and look at the overall cost of a building, it's between 15 to 25% of revenue, right? So it's a big element of the value. That's ultimately the value of the building. But it's also a relatively small amount compared to the revenue. If you take 20%, for example, if you spend 10% on a 20% cost, and it creates 10% higher occupancy in the building, that's 5 times more revenue that you're generating. So you have to have that proactive approach to it. If you just look at it as a cost, you're going to miss the bigger picture on these real estate assets. And I think a lot of assets have come into the market from a developer where they've been built and now they're looking to keep costs down. It's important to look at those assets differently and spend the money in the right places.
I'm keen to throw this one out to questions from the audience. We've got some very senior people here who are happy to share their experiences. Oh, lots of hands going up. Yes, please, sir. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman, please? Your second question of the day. Thank you very much for your enthusiasm and interest, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you indeed. Just remind us of your name.
My name's Sean Heckford. I'm the Head of Real Estate and Facilities for Parsons. I'm just picking up on that last point, actually, and I think, Anthony, you make some valid points there about expenditure, but you seem to have missed the real crux of the FM as a risk management tool. If we don't manage that building properly that we've managed to fill up with tenants, they've got to go home, particularly here if the AC fails. So the facilities management, particularly in an environment such as this, is actually business critical. It's not just nice for people to have a nice office. And that was just a point I wanted to make.
Abdullah, if I can turn to you, is what you do seen as business critical within MR? Do you get a seat at the top table?
Of course, it's business critical, and we get to sit on design reviews, like Mick said, because the company over the years have realized the importance of the facilities management role in terms of the design review and input in new buildings. The usual challenges with any building that is built in the UAE is that the material is not available in the local market. The type of material will require a huge amount of maintenance. The cost of maintenance will be very expensive. So having the FM team involved from design review, from design time, is something very critical to the business, and after also the completion of the building. Because, again, it's an operating building, people are living there, you need to have the comfort and you need to have the environment, the safe environment for the people to be there. And it's always very difficult to reach that balance between, the financial requirement and the operational requirement. Usually the finance managers will say, cut the cost, while, the FM managers want to provide the latest technologies, which will be cost effective. So you need to be innovative and you need to be proactive and identify ways where you can, achieve both targets.
And Anthony, do you find when you're bidding for new assets, when you're looking to acquire properties, that properties built by companies such as MR with a reputation for investing in quality, good facilities management, is there genuinely a premium when you're in those bidding wars?
Absolutely. You see the difference. From a fund point of view, you invest in a yield. The lower the yield, the higher the price. When a building is well developed, like the likes of Imar, that yield is sometimes 100 basis points less than other assets in the market. So there's a huge premium, especially in Dubai, for well-built, well-maintained assets.
Yes, please.
All right, so this has been a great day for TrackRef because it seems like everyone's singing the song of asset management and long-term data and this kind of stuff. So I've got a question for Abdullah Al-Wahidi. I hope I said your name right. I'm very sorry if I didn't. And Mr. Anthony Taylor. What kind of data needs to be brought to the table to go from this sounds like a good idea to we really need to spend this capital expense on the front end? Because people say if there's a clear path for this is going to cost us as an operational expense later, so we need to spend it as a capital expense now. People say, well, if it's clear, we always make that decision. But I know that people go for, I forget the term, but it's a type of engineering where basically you go through the plans and you drop the cost again, and you go through the plans and you drop the cost again. Value engineering. Thank you, Chris. So what type of information really locks in the decision that we're going to spend it on the front end no matter what?
Thanks very much indeed. It's an interesting point. What's the data point that convinces the CFO, the managing director, the chairman, that it's worth a little bit more capex? Abdullah.
Well, to make such decisions, usually, finance people would require, backup information or data, as you put it. To achieve that, you need to capture the information. Such information will be, and it starts with a very basic terminology that is used quietly in the FM, which is the life cycle management, where you do a calculation of your asset lifetime over life and how much money you would require to replace the asset. That's one way. And one of the elements, or some of the elements of the life cycle management or of any asset is the initial cost, the maintenance cost, the amount of maintenance hours you would spend on the asset itself. All of these factors, all of these numbers, if you put them together, they will tell you whether it's worth to maintain this asset or to replace that asset. So if you have such information, when you go to your, the fund manager or the finance director and you tell them, listen, I need, to replace this asset today because it's not feasible to maintain it, they will say, why? Because usually, finance people will use the rule of thumb and say it should be there for 5 years. Why do you want to replace it today? Well, if you have the data in hand and you show that it costs more actually to maintain that replace over a period of time, then you'll get the approval. And I guess that's one way to convince him to spend more money.
And any other perspectives? Mike, if I can turn to you again, the examples of hotels, it's a tough job to convince the owner that they need to spend a little bit more, either on capital expenditure, on having a well-built building that will wear well, or on operational expenditure. Actually, you want to get a really good facilities management team on board rather than cheap guys who will do a job badly. What were, to echo the question from Christopher, what were the data points that would convince the owners that they would do it? How did you get them to the aha moment when they said, okay, Mike, we'll write the check?
I'm not sure that all the owners are there just yet. And it's also important in terms of hotels to distinguish between capital expenditure and operational expenditure. They're treated very differently in the hotel accounts. The sustainability of the building, i.e. its longevity, is obviously an issue. And I think it's mainly by analogy that you become more persuasive. So if you have examples of hotels that have been in place for 40, 50, 60 years, I'd take, for instance, the Intercon, the original Intercon on the Creek. That's still functioning 40 years later, albeit in a different brand. And that was money well spent. That made a lot of money for the family who invested in it. So it's still an ongoing conversation. And in terms of upfront cost, it's still a difficult conversation to have with owners. It's not easy. And part of that is actually due to the lack of data that's available, so that you can point in empirical terms that if you spend 10% more at the upfront stage, that will yield 15, 20% further down the line over the life of the asset.
Another element, and I heard this, I'll come to you in a second, at a hotel conference earlier on this year in Dubai, and someone said, actually for hotels, specifically hotels, if you have a high lead rating or you have other credentials that you can badge as environmentally friendly, such as energy efficiency, you can use that as marketing collateral, because there is a group of consumers, particularly in the United States and Northern Europe, but globally, who will not go to the supermarket and buy the cheapest washing powder. They will buy the most environmentally friendly washing powder, and ditto with their hotel stays. When they're on booking.com, they will, this small group, pay $10, $20 extra a night to stay in an eco-friendly hotel that can say, have some kind of statistic to say that we are efficient. Is that true in your experience? Is it becoming true in your experience?
I think perhaps the interesting question to ask is not, is it becoming true? Should it actually become the case? And I think the answer to that is most definitely yes, for a number of reasons. Firstly, that it will enable companies that are using hotels to improve their corporate social responsibility obligations generally. And secondly, it can enhance a brand, that if your brand becomes associated with better facilities management, longevity of building, low costs, then that's something you can sell in the marketplace. So I think the question isn't, is it happening, but should it be happening? And should reward programs that exist and loyalty programs encourage staying in those properties? And I think the answer is absolutely yes, there's plenty of opportunity.
And Abdullah, MR has that reputation. I bought an MR apartment 10 years ago, rented one. Most of us who live in Dubai, the UAE, see MR as a good quality brand. There is value in that reputation. It's like a lot of reputations, they take a long time to build and they're easily dismantled. But you are now seeing that reputation in the slight premium you can charge when you're selling property.
Of course, and I mean the reputation that Amar has built did not happen overnight. It took efforts of people and designers and operators, and of course I wouldn't forget the FM companies that worked with us over the years that helped in developing such a good reputation for the asset.
We have one more question. Yes, please.
Hi, Chris Mills. I'm a consultant for facilities management. One of the issues I'm talking about, what Chris and Abdullah and Anthony was talking about, is that the quality of data in the market around facilities management with regards to the costs and the construction is very kind of sparse and doesn't get shared across the industry equally. So not everyone has got an equal playing field when it comes to the type of information and the quality of information. So when you're trying to put together proposals about new concepts or new methodologies to provide cost savings or benefits, you need to look at both where the data came from and also the credibility of the person who's talking to you. Because, as you said, the reputation of an organisation takes a long time to establish, but is very quick to disappear.
What do you think the solution might be to that?
I thought what REWA has done with the service charge model was a good step, where we're now, in order to register your service charges, you have to register them in, or the Owners Association has to register them in with REWA to get them registered.
Very quickly, on a related issue, again, Abdullah, to you. We heard Ali talking earlier on from MEFMA about a rating system for facilities management. It's baby steps at the moment. It would be voluntary rather than compulsory. What would you like to see in terms of some kind of rating system?
I wouldn't, disagree with Ali when it comes to rating the buildings or rating the services, because it helps at the decision making at various stages. But what I want to see in the future is actually the availability of data in the market for benchmarking purposes. Today, I don't know whether I'm doing good in terms of energy saving or not, because I know how much it costs me per square foot. The challenge in the market here today is that, there's no, let's say, cooperation between developers. It's more of a competition. There's no knowledge sharing when it comes to numbers. Everybody wants to protect and say that this is my own information and I'm not willing to give it up. And the same applies to the service provider, because everybody thinks that, if I give him my cost, they will bid and some other company will bid and then they will get the job. So that element of mistrust that needs to be addressed, and I would say I would look upon MEFMA to bring in people and say it's okay to share such information. There's no harm in sharing, and there's no shame in terms of telling people how much it costs you, for example, to generate a ton of refrigeration. There's no harm in sharing the information in terms of how much it costs you to maintain a square foot in a building, because that will help actually other organizations, work together and at the end of the day achieve a common target by all the FM organizations, which is minimizing the cost and delivering a quality of service.
I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to spend 30 seconds summing up their one thing on their wish list in terms of facilities management for the next couple of years or so. Just 30 seconds or so. If I can start with you, the perspective from J&J.
Really about engaging FM services as early as possible in any project, and understanding the difference between cost and value. FM brings a lot of value, and it's not about lowest cost.
Mike, your perspective.
Incentivize, don't penalize, and enter into very open discussions between the parties and end up with a balanced contract.
What about the perspective of the asset manager, Emirates MBD Asset Management?
Yeah, I think just again, don't be afraid to spend the money. Spend it in the right way, on the right things, and the value of the building will be enhanced and the building will last longer.
And Abdullah from MR.
Good question. I want to see more UAE nationals actually in the FM industry. Basically, this is my aim and this is what I want. I want to see more UAE nationals. I want my people to be empowered and be more into this field, because the market is huge, the opportunity is big, but we only need the ambitions, and that's what's needed.
It's a great way to end. Thanks very much indeed.